Hello and welcome back to Showtime Central. As always, we're your host, Affinity May and Holly Wigmore, giving you the latest on everything arts and entertainment and the theatre, film and TV industry news, picking out our favourite films. And once again, we've got a very special segment today, an interview from the brilliantly talented Laura Horton and Madeline McMahon, the creative brains behind a one-woman play called Breathless. Like every week, to delve into today's episode, myself and Affinity are going to discuss some of our favourite movies in today's Film of the Week. So, Finn, would you like to kick this week off?
I will. I have just watched this film last night, so it's pretty close. But I watched Scream 6, a horror movie for today.
Nice.
Have you watched it?
I haven't, no.
Have you watched any of the Screams?
I will admit, no, but I am a fan of horror, and I did want to watch Scream 5 because Jack Quaid was in it, and I absolutely love his work on The Boys. So I don't. And Jenna Ortega's in it as well, isn't she?
She was an amazing actor. It was so weird seeing her smiling. Yeah. I'm used to her not smiling on Wednesday. But yeah, she's in it. It was so good. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. But yeah, it was so scary. I'm not really one to watch horror movies.
No.
But the trailer was amazing. So I watched it. Very gory.
Because I've heard things that it's like a whole new phase of Ghostface being like a villain.
Yeah.
I obviously don't know who it is, and no spoilers to anyone listening.
I won't do any spoilers, but
it
was amazing. But at every turn there was something happened that you just were not expecting, and then there would be a different suspect that you wouldn't even think was a suspect, and then they would change. It was crazy.
Do you think you've specifically got to be a fan of the franchise to enjoy it, or do you think you can enjoy it as a one-off?
Well, honestly, I haven't watched any of the other Scream movies. This was the only Scream movie I watched, and so I thought I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
I actually understood it straight away. I saw, because they obviously had past references.
Yeah, of course.
Still knew what it was. I'm not a big horror movie watcher as well, but I watched it and it was good. I think it was more scary because it was quite realistic.
Yeah, it's set in a real world scenario, like we were talking about playing a couple of weeks ago, even though there's CGI and stuff, you're transported into a world where the fictional characters are realised versions of people who could exist in life, and this potentially could happen if someone were.
Because you watch some horror movies and
they're so unrealistic.
Yeah. It would never happen in real. But this was serial killers, all the gore, the way people got murdered, that can actually happen in real life. So I think that's what made it so scary.
That is terrifying.
But yeah, I left to walk back to the car afterwards. So scared. I was looking around there's no mask.
Because I can imagine you left in the dark as well. You're
I did. Finished at 11 p.m.
Oh my goodness.
I was so scared.
Yeah, it always heightens your fear as well. Coming out in the darkness and being oh my god, I've just watched something terrifying and now I've got to go home in the dark.
But I think a few weeks ago we said some films are only good on big screens.
Yeah.
I think this would work on any screen.
Nice.
Yeah. But no, it was really good. I recommend it to the horror watchers and even those who aren't horror lovers, because I'm not, and I still really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. And speaking of thrillers, my film of the week this week is Last Night in Soho. So this is one that came out in 2021, and this is a movie that comes from my all-time favourite film director and auteur, Edgar Wright. So some of you listening might know Edgar Wright famously for directing the Cornetto trilogy. So if you're unfamiliar with that name, that is the series of 3 films, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz and The World's End. And in his earlier career, he also produced one of my favourite ever TV shows, the brilliantly absurd Channel 4 British sitcom Spaced, which I absolutely love. So this narrative follows an aspiring fashion designer, Eloise, who's grown up in Cornwall, of all places. Love a little shout out to Devon.
Yes.
Her entire life, and moves to London to pursue her dreams in the fashion industry. Whilst lodging in London, she's mysteriously able to enter the 1960s, where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer, Sandy, and lives this decade through her eyes in a dazzling series of events. However, with this being a thriller, this dazzling starlight isn't all she seems, and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something far darker that's a cinematic thrill for the senses. So I went to see this one back in 2021 when it first released in cinemas, because I was I haven't seen anything Edgar Wright in a long time. This was one of his standout films that he'd not really done a thriller before.
Yeah.
Shaun of the Dead, it can be counted as a horror, sure, but it's the comedic natures that bring it to life. He's very much a comedic auteur. The style of his writing does fall into comedic nature, but I didn't laugh once at this. I was on the edge of my seat, even though I saw it in cinemas, like we were saying, with big screen and small screen screening. Honestly, this is on Amazon Prime and it is so good. I would highly recommend it. So it stars Anya Taylor-Joy as Sandy, Thompson McKenzie as Eloise, Matt Smith as Jack, and Diana Rigg as Mrs. Collins, and this was her final ever role within cinema. So it's a really historic legacy if any of you are fans of Diana Rigg. What was I going to say? Yeah. So when this first premiered back in October 2021, I was incredibly excited. As I've said, a thriller wasn't really a directorial choice I expected from writer to director, but oh my goodness, does it pay off in this motion picture. I absolutely adore it, and I was left truly gobsmacked by some of the twists and turns that Sandy and Eloise face. And some of the scenes as well are done in one shot. Like there's a scene where they're dancing and it's so gorgeously done, but it's all done in one take, but it makes it look like it's mirrored because Eloise, who's seeing this life through Sandy and is seeing like the dazzling 1960s, she's dancing with Jack, but then also Anya Taylor-Joy's character comes in and dances at the same time, and I was like, that's got to be done in like multiple takes, but no, it's all done in one, and it's so good. It's absolutely a treat of emotions that you'll find yourself chortling with Wright's comedic nature in one scene and then be left with a spine-chilling twist in reality in the next scene. It's honestly cinematic brilliance. And I've just got a little quote from an interview when Edgar Wright talked to GQ magazine about the movie in 2021, and he explained some of the music behind the motion picture. He expressed that, I try to zone in on a particular period, the mid-60s, especially the heyday of the female singers of that time. I honed in on songs tonally that felt right. Most of the songs that are in there, they're sort of stained with tears. Even the ones that are upbeat, they're kind of melancholic in a way. And with this beautiful quote from Edgar Wright, our first song today is Downtown, but the up-tempo version from Anya Taylor-Joy in her role of Sandy. Well, doesn't that song truly capture the essence of the swinging 60s? As I said, Last Night in Soho is one of my all-time favourite films. But now we're on to the weekend watch list. So my first pick this week is Good Omens. So this one's available on Amazon Prime, and this 2019 comedy series is based on Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's 1990 best-selling novel. I watched the show when it first debuted, but after speaking with Millie Hisaka about the work of Gaiman last week, I truly remembered what a brilliant production this is and had to recommend it. There's currently only one series of the show that stars the brilliant dynamic duo of Michael Sheen and David Tennant, starring as an angel and a demon called Aziraphale and Crowley. But season 2 has been announced for a little while now, so the series is expected to return to our screens sometime very soon, hopefully within summer of 2023. As shortly expressed, the narrative follows Aziraphale and Crowley, who team up to form such an unlikely duo. The duo have become overly fond of life on Earth, and they are forced with forming an alliance in an attempt to stop the approaching Armageddon that will plague Earth if they don't find the missing Antichrist. It's truly a whimsical narrative, but one you'll find yourself wanting to binge, with the series only being a total of 6 episodes. When discussing the arrival of Series 2, Neil Gaiman recently tweeted that, just a reminder, once we hand it in, we're still months away from it being on your screens. There are lots of steps still to go. Every foreign language needs to be dubbed and subtitled, for example. Sometime in summer, we promise. Amazon Prime will need to decide on their broadcast date first, proving we may have to wait a little while longer for this one, but it's definitely one I'm excited for. For fans of Gaiman's work like myself, you'll be happy to know that although Good Omens Season 2 is still months away, it's far from the only Gaiman production currently in production. New episodes of The Sandman are set to film this summer, and an Amazon Prime television adaptation of Gaiman's novel Anansi Boys is also in the works. So my next pick this week is Daisy Jones and the Six. Available on Amazon Prime, this musical drama is the most recent production on this week's watch list, initially being released early this month on the streaming service. Set in 1977, the narrative follows the titular band Daisy Jones and the Six, who are on top of the world. The band has risen from obscurity to fame, and then, after a sold-out show, they call it quits. Decades later, the band members agree to reveal the truth. I will admit this isn't a show I've personally seen yet, so I can't comment heavily on the production, but it's definitely one I'll be considering into my own watch list, as from the trailers alone I can tell I'll enjoy the performative nature of the show. And with our show being all around the arts and entertainment industry, this narrative seems like a perfect pick for you guys to enjoy this weekend. Just like Good Omens, this series is also based upon a novel, with Daisy Jones and the Six first being released in 2019 by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This 2019 novel about the fictional 70s rock group of the same name has sold well over 1 million copies and has a whopping 940,000 ratings on literary social media hub Goodreads. So it's definitely going to be interesting for fans of the original novel to see how this narrative translates for television. And my final pick this week is one of my absolute all-time favourites, and this is Only Murders in the Building. So this series is available on Disney Plus, and it's a comedy whodunit series, which is one of my favourites of all time on the streaming platform, telling the story of 3 individuals who share an obsession about true crime and suddenly find themselves wrapped up in one. When a grisly death occurs inside their apartment building of the Arconia, this brilliantly dynamic trio, who are made up of Mabel, played by Selena Gomez, Charles, played by Steve Martin, and Oliver, played by Martin Short, team up to solve the murder and thus create a true crime podcast entitled Only Murders in the Building. There are currently 2 series available on the streaming service, brilliantly suited for a weekend binge, as each episode is only around 30 minutes each. And trust me, this is one you guys will definitely want to binge, as you'll be entranced by the trio's investigative natures. It's got moments of comedic genius, but you'll also be on the edge of your seat as you piece together the mysteries of the murders. With Series 2 ending on a huge cliffhanger, eagerly awaiting fans like myself have recently been treated by a glimpse into the upcoming 3rd series, which has signed Meryl Streep alongside Paul Rudd to join the Starfield cast. It's unknown yet what characters they'll play, but it's got fans of these acclaimed actors incredibly excited to see them joining a helm of a production that's got so much potential for a developing storyline, despite each series having a moral focus of murder. With Meryl joining the cast, it's not just fans that are eagerly excited about her character. In a recent interview with Vogue, Selena Gomez recalls revealing her dream guest star, expressing that, "I would reach for the biggest of all, probably Meryl or someone amazing like that," with her dream being endorsed with the upcoming final series, which plentiful viewers like myself are truly excited for. And to lead on to Only Murders in the Building, our next song is Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads, which is played in Series 2. What a brilliant track that leads into Only Murders in the Building so well. Even though it's about a murder mystery, which isn't one of my favourite genres, oh my god, I love that show so much. But up now, we have got a very special interview with both Laura Horton and Madeline McMahon about their production of Breathless. I interviewed these 2 creative duos on Tuesday, and here's what they had to say about the production.
So I'm just going to start off by asking you both if you could please introduce yourselves and your roles within the industry of the performing arts.
I'm Laura Horton. I'm a playwright. I write journalism. I write for Vogue. I also worked in PR for 15 years, which I'm slowly moving away from. I also teach playwriting, and I do lots of things to try and hustle for a career, including running bad erotic fiction writing evenings. Just about to do one at Wells Millennium Centre. So yeah, I think that's mainly me.
Hello, I'm Madeline McMahon. I'm an actor and a singer and a stand-up comedian, and I've been an actor for about 13 years and a comedian for about 3 years. And yeah, I work mainly in theatre, bits and pieces of TV and film as well. I'd like to do more of that because it's nice pay. But I love theatre. Theatre's my passion, really.
This one is directly for you, Laura. How did you get into the industry of writing, and how did you feel about writing such a personal play about your own experiences?
Yeah, so I wanted to write from a really, really young age, but didn't know how to even go about doing it. And I thought I would write novels. I didn't know, it just didn't occur to me that you could be a playwright. It wasn't something that anyone ever talked about. And the only people we ever studied in school were Shakespeare or dead white men. It just didn't feel like it was a career path. I mean, it sort of isn't, because you can't make a living as a playwright unless you're very specifically like in a relationship with someone who's got a lot of money or you're independently wealthy. It's impossible. But I was writing for years on and off, and I started writing for television initially and then had sort of a strange experience with that. And then I was already working in theatre, working as a PR. And I just thought, why am I not trying to write for the stage? Because I love it and I work in it and I see a lot of theatre. And so I started writing, and I got onto Soho Writers Lab in 2017, and I paid to do a course at Morley College. It was the only affordable course I could do. And then since 2017, I've been just plugging away alongside work to try and make it happen. Mm-hmm. And I did lots of like short playwriting things of the way. And I think they're unpaid, but it's like 5, 10, 20-minute plays. like miniaturists or at the Arcola, and that's sort of how you get your work seen, and then it sort of grows from there. And then eventually I got commissioned to write a 20-minute piece for the Space, and I wrote a play called Giddy Tuppy, and then that won an Oncom award, and then they put on my full-length play Labyrinth Diet, which I'd written on the side, which is about diet culture. So then I put on 3 20-minute plays at the Theatre of Plymouth, and then Breathless was born out of that. But it's really hard to talk about because there's no set way in. Yeah. It's really hard to demystify. I feel like I just plugged away, did loads of little things, and now things are coming together a bit more, but I'm still not earning a living from writing, but I am trying. This is the first year I've given up PR. So it's just hard. It's all hustle, isn't it? Yeah. Sort of doing bits and bobs to try and make it work.
I get you. Yeah, it's definitely hard to try and worm about and see what works and also keep you happy at the same time. And just expanding on Breathless, how was it writing that for the first time and being like, oh, this is so heavily about me, even though it's under like a pseudonym and it's not you playing yourself?
Yeah, it is very close to my life. Obviously, there are made up elements. I feel like you're sitting there watching people make judgments about you, which is quite hard, but for the most part they've been very positive, and people's reactions to the play have been very kind and very positive. I have had negative things. I've had negative things from other writers, but I feel like it's such a subjective process. You can't, and it's done what I wanted it to do. It's connected people that I've met through like Hoarding UK, or people have come to the show directly because of the subject matter, or they've come because of fashion or whatever, and then they've kind of reached out to me. I've had a lot of messages. So I think the play sort of did resonate more. I was very conscious of the fact that I could have written it and pretended it wasn't about me, or I could have written a play that wasn't about me, about hoarding. But I knew with my PR hat on that if I did talk about it as a personal thing, I would get more of a focus on the play and I would be able to talk about hoarding more authentically. So it was the right call. But yes, it is a bit vulnerable sometimes.
Definitely. And Maddie, with Laura speaking about this vulnerability, how does it feel to take the helm in a one-woman play that's so closely personal to Laura?
Oh, I was talking to someone about this last night because we hadn't met when I arrived at Laura's house. So I auditioned for this like we're doing now over Zoom. And I hadn't met Laura or the director, Steph. And then I literally just arrived in Plymouth with a suitcase at her door and was conscious that I would be playing a version, an imagined version, but telling a story that's very similar to Laura's, kind of her. And I was conscious as we went through it, I was staying with you and we would talk lots in the evening and stuff, but I was conscious that this would feel like a personal story and that I didn't want it to feel like I was playing you or copying you. I wanted to try and make her feel quite separate to Laura so that Laura could have that distinction, but also it's vulnerable in that sense. There would be some things that I knew were difficult things for Laura to talk about in the rehearsal room, or then we go, how do we make Sophie separate, or how do we make her feel like somebody other than Laura so that it can be something completely different?
Brilliant. And can you both explain your journey with Breathless and as it as a play and what it means to both of you as individuals? Obviously Laura as the playwright and you, Maddie, as acting as Sophie.
It just feels like boom, 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 like things have happened so quickly. Like we did Plymouth, it went down well. We did Edinburgh, which is a month, and it's very, very, very intense. And things went very well there. I was talking to Maddie before we went, and I sort of said the things that I would like to happen. I was like, I'd like to win a Fringe first. And I remember being a bit coy about it. Like, I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to go to New York. There was something else. What was it? Soho. And they've all happened. Yeah. And then that's continued to happen. So I've had amazing meetings with agents and production companies since then. I'm going into the National Theatre on Tuesday to sign 40 copies of my book that they've ordered for the National Theatre Bookshop, which is also a dream come true. Probably a number of things at play, part of which was luck and just a beautiful team coming together and a story being told at the right time. It's dreamlike, like that we're going to New York.
I think the weird thing about theatre is it's so untangible. So when it happens, it's literally happening and then you finish, and particularly for a one-person show, because there's no bit where you pop into the wings and go, oh, do you think it's going well? Well, I don't know how that bit went. Do you think that joke went down well? And there's none of that until the very end. I did have a couple of moments on the Soho run. I really tried, me and Laura were quite good at trying to keep each other grounded, both in Edinburgh and with the Soho run, about enjoy every minute. You sort of can't, like you said, but about having a few moments to go. I remember Hugh, we've got this brilliant, the team at Theatre Royal Plymouth have been been incredible. They've supported us so much. There is a wonderful man called Hugh Borthwick, who is part of their production team there. And he is basically the calmest man in the world, or seems it. And he came and got the show into Soho. And just before he left, he said, enjoy it, guys. Just remember to enjoy it. It's felt incredibly monumental, really. I'd never been to anything at Soho Theatre. I've never taken a show there. It's been a dream of mine to do that for years. And that was just felt incredible.
Oh, amazing. It's so wonderful hearing both sides of the stories and how it's just developed over the years. Obviously, when it first started to the 20 minutes and just, it's just brilliant to hear you guys both talk about it. And expanding upon Edinburgh and obviously Breathless going to New York, which is absolutely monumental news. How did you guys feel initially getting a Fringe first? And how do you feel knowing you'll be presenting at Brits Off Broadway in New York?
I cried in Lidl. I was walking past Lidl and I got the phone call to say you've won a Fringe first, because I was producing it as well. If I'd just been the writer, I wouldn't have been told that first. But he phoned me to say that we'd won a Fringe first, and I dashed into Lidl because I started crying and stood in the frozen section, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. And then I phoned my mum first because it's my mum, and then I phoned Steph and Maddie, and I can't really remember the conversations. I was so overwhelmed, and I cry when I'm happy, so it wasn't sad tears, it was just sort of overwhelm. And I remember phoning Hugh Borthwick, who we just talked about, and Hugh had said about enjoying it, and I took myself off for like a really nice lunch and a glass of wine. It feels exciting, but I am nervous about New York, and I'm nervous about how it will be received. It's a very British show, to just have a think about what we're doing there. But it's so exciting. I think I haven't got my head around being in New York and bumbling around and what that's going to look like.
I feel the same. I find it quite difficult. Some people like look forward to holidays and then but I think, when you get back from holiday and you sort of can't ever remember that you were there, you're like, was it all a dream? I don't think I'll realise that we're going to New York until I literally put my feet on the ground. Then press play, see what happens.
So I'm just going to wrap it up with one final question. Could you both give some of your top tips for entering the creative industry, either in script writing for you, Laura, or acting for you, Maddie?
Just small steps, because I think I come across a lot of writers who just get very overwhelmed and don't end up doing anything, which is fine. But I would say just try to do little things, even if that's like short plays, or just throw your hat in the ring for everything and see what sticks. You'll get a lot of rejection. I also have a rejection folder, which I find quite helpful because it shows that I'm applying for things, even if I don't get them. And obviously now I do get successes as well as still many rejections. And I think you just have to be dogged. You have to really want it, because the sad truth is it's a very, very, very competitive industry, and it's wonderful, but there are a lot of pitfalls, and it's difficult if you're not from money, or you don't have contacts. It's a difficult place to navigate. But I think if you really want it and you keep going, you can create some sort of life in the creative arts, whatever that looks like.
I think that's amazing advice. I'd say the same is really true for acting, actually. Like, by all means, have big ambitions. But like you said, there's so many people doing this. You have to work out why you're doing it. What's the reason why you want to do this? Is it for telling stories? Do you want to change the world? Because you can change the world by being the Prime Minister, or you can change it in a studio theatre above a pub in Islington. You really can. I believe that theatre has the power to do that.
What a brilliant interview from both Laura Horton and Madeline McMahon, which I was delighted to interview them. I've talked to Laura a couple of times now regarding her work on Breathless, but she is absolutely amazing. So just after a little music interlude, we're going to be talking about Breathless a little bit more, and I'll be giving some of my views on when I went to see the production. But our next song up next today on Showtime Central is Fashion by David Bowie. So usually when we talk about pieces of theatricals, we like to pick a song that's directly from the production. But as Breathless is a play, and with one woman, who's Madeline, who we've just heard, who's absolutely sweetheart, I chose to pick David Bowie's Fashion because the play is all about Laura's real life experiences as a hoarder of fashions and attending things like sample sales up in London. So I'm just going to go into like a little mini review of my views on the production because, oh my God, I gave this 5 stars. It was so good. So I got to interview Laura the day before, where she was actually doing one of her own sales of clothing she's immaculated over the years, and just hearing some of the things she had to say to me and how this reflected in the production. Oh my goodness, it was so interesting to get that insight. So Breathless is a play inspired by her own life stories. It's 65 minutes from genius and Plymouth Laureate of Words Laura Horton, who originally wrote the play as a 20-minute piece, which started off as an explorative creation at the Theatre Royal Plymouth's The Lab. So that's the smallest stage we have in Plymouth. The show has since debuted in London at the Soho Theatre and will even be presented in New York as part of a festival called Brits Off Broadway, where it will run between the 18th of April to the 7th of May. This is such exciting news for Laura and Maddie, as I can, oh my God, going to New York is one of my all-time biggest dreams. It's definitely on my bucket list. I don't even have a bucket list, but that's like the one thing that's on it. Oh my goodness, and it's such exciting news. I remember when Laura told me for the first time and I was like, no way, that's amazing. And despite this narrative being heavily based on her own backstory, the experiences are characterised through a fictional version of Horton, as she expressed, who's renamed Sophie, played by Madeline. When I first went to see the show at Theatre Royal Plymouth back in November, what made Breathless so unique for me is the fact that it's written as a one-woman theatrical piece, like nothing I'd ever seen before. So I have seen shows that have done this more. I went to see Fanboy recently, and next week, hopefully, we're going to have an interview from the creative mind behind this, Joe Selman-Lever, which is very exciting news. But the way that Maddie does this on stage is absolutely brilliant, because Sophie's exploring her life and just understanding things. So she's moved back to Devon after living her life in London and trying to get into things like writing for Vogue, which is all true to Laura's life stories, which is absolutely insane.
I still love how local this is.
Literally so local.
Yeah.
She's Plymouth based and she is absolutely brilliant. Like, Jane, our lecturer, got me in contact with her in the first place, and I remember her saying like, oh, I've got a friend who's a playwright, and I was like, fantastic, please put me in contact with her. And as I said, that's the third time I've interviewed Laura now about certain things. So I went to a couple of her sales. I've did an article about her launching a little campaign which is called Hidden by Things, where she's inspiring people to take on the helm of immaculating things in their life, and just like people who have got excess clothing and donating them to charity shops, where you get like a little label where you sew in and you send your story off to Laura. So when people find it in charity shops, you can find like a label that's called Hidden by Things, and there's a whole website that Laura's launched. If anyone's interested, it's www.hiddenbythings.com, where you can see stories behind pieces in charity shops. So if you ever see like something, because I feel like in charity shops you always wonder like, who's this come from? Why have they donated it? Like, especially when you find designer goods, like Laura's like taken over loads of like she was buying stuff that wouldn't even fit her, like a size 8, just so she could envision herself in it. It's an absolutely wonderful story. But she's launching this whole campaign to try and bring back stories to life of people who have had these things and just are accumulating them within their lives. It's absolutely brilliant. And with this being a one-woman show and the fact that I luckily got seated in the front row, oh my goodness, this piece was incredibly intimate. The continuous storytelling device of rhetorical questions to the audience was highly enjoyable, and the answers were left up to audience interpretation. Vocals from Madeline were fantastic, delivering Sophie's lines so emotionally, resonating with those with similar life experiences, allowing a true story to be told on stage. It's an entangled life story full of turns. One moment you're laughing about a story she's retelling from her childhood, the next you're wiping away a tear about a confession she's made to those she considered friends. Breathless is truly a narrative full of surprises, and through the use of incredible acting skills, the whole story is able to unravel in a truly exceptional performance. Honestly, to sum it up, Breathless is a truly excellent piece of character-driven theatre that anyone will be able to find compassion in, and it's one of my favourite things I've seen whilst reviewing.
To watch that now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it isn't in Plymouth anymore because it's just done a run at the Soho Theatre, and of course, we'll be going to New York. The way it's done on stage, like, oh my goodness, Laura is amazingly talented. Like she was saying, it originated as a 20-minute piece, which later grew, which was done in the lab. And then when I went to see it, and I luckily got seated in the front row, oh my God, that was in the Drum Theatre. So I don't really think it would be, if it came back to Plymouth, I don't really think it would develop onto the lyric, purely because the staging is so minimal. But the way it's done, like, it's really limited staging, and there's no clothing on stage, despite it being such a fashion heavily like written piece. But it's got like, how would I describe them? It's like clear like hangers that you'd use for like hanging up like a dress or a suit,
Yeah.
you know, like those clear ones.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of them, so you're sort of left up to interpretation as well with that, like what sort of clothing is she wearing, because Sophie's outfit within it
Do
that
you
Maddie
think the
wears,
fact that it's on a smaller stage probably also helps the whole
yeah,
atmosphere
honestly,
of
it really helps the atmosphere,
If it
because
was
you
a
really
bigger
feel like you're
stage,
I don't really think it would suit it, because like you're really plunged into it, and I think that's probably why it did so well at Edinburgh, because within that it's like over, I think it's like a week. I've never been, but I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of people in the industry talk about it, and I know some people at Theatre Royal that went with Breathless, and they were like, we couldn't even see everything we wanted to. And I think that's such a wonderful thing that we have the theatre in Plymouth, because a lot of the ones I've seen, like Fanboy, and I think the one I'm going to see tonight, On Track, might have been there as well, but there's a lot of smaller productions that are getting to grace a stage, such as The Lab or like the Drum Theatre,
Yeah.
and it's really bringing a whole new audience to these stories that wouldn't otherwise get a chance to be developed like this. And with it being such a small auditorium, like honestly, they're so personal. Like with Fanboy as well, I'll just delve into that one a little bit as a little tease for next week. The way that Joe talked to the audience in that, and like the way he portrayed himself, oh my god, it was, you literally felt like he was talking to you, and that was all about like pop culture and stuff.
Yeah.
So very different from Breathless being about fashion and acceptance and belonging. But the way that shows are done in there is like nothing I've ever seen before, and I'm lucky to be going again tonight. So maybe in a few weeks we'll have some more reviews, because this week I'm going to see On Track tonight in the Drum, and then on Monday I'm going to see The Mousetrap, which I'm very excited for, as that's Agatha Christie's longest ever running play, and I think the longest ever running play in London, which is absolutely insane. So I'm very, very excited to see that one. But that is enough about theatre for this week. We are on to our next segment, which is Actor of the Week. So Finn, would you like to kick us off with this segment this week?
Yes, this week my actor of the week is Josh Gad.
I love him. Oh, brilliant.
It's only because recently, and by recently I mean within this last week, I watched Frozen 2.
I don't blame you, it's such a good
for
film.
the first time ever. I've watched Frozen 1 as soon as it came out in cinemas. But
Yes.
for some reason, I didn't even know there was a Frozen 2.
You didn't even know? Oh my God.
And I was just scrolling through TikTok, and you know when it comes out of like film clips?
Yeah.
And I saw, and I was, I have to watch that.
You're like, what is this? I don't remember this scene.
So I went back and I watched Frozen 2,
Oh.
and Olaf just made my week.
Yes.
And so that's why Josh Gad is my actor of the week. So for those of you who don't know, he is an American actor, and he was the voice behind Olaf, the snowman in Frozen. It's a fictional character, but it's just so funny. I know you've watched it, and I just cannot stop laughing. Like,
No, he's such a heartwarming actor as
Yeah.
well. Like, he's gone on to do quite a few other things as well. Like, live action wise, he's been LeFou in the Beauty and the Beast remake, the live action one. And one of my favourite roles ever, he originated one of the elders in Book of Mormon.
Yes.
I went to see Book of Mormon in London, obviously not with the original Broadway cast, but the way he brings life to Elder Cunningham in such a, oh my
So
God,
talented.
it's so hilarious. Book of Mormon is such a brilliant production that Josh Gad took the helm of and made such an iconic piece of theatre. Like, I adore his work, and I'm so glad you were able to pick him, because brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
If I'm going to be honest, I actually didn't know who Josh Gad was before I researched who the voice actor was behind Olaf. But I read up on him and researched him, and I recognised his face, so I must know him.
You must know him.
Yeah.
Like, he's the sort of guy that you like recognise a voice of more, because I remember
Yeah.
listening to, as I say, Book of Mormon for the first time, being like, hang on a minute, I know you.
But yeah, so up next we have got When I Am Older by Josh Gad, who is playing Olaf in it. It was really hard. It was between that, or it was between In Summer.
I love him
because I absolutely love it. But I thought I'd go for When I Am Older.
Fine.
What a brilliant actor Josh Gad was. I love that song. And just, he's got such a distinctive vocal voice that you can
does. He is
recognise
so
anywhere. He
talented.
is brilliant. But now we're on to my actor of the week. So any of our weekly listeners of Showtime Central, you'll know a few weeks ago I talked about my adoration for The Last of Us. And despite not having seen the show yet, well, now I have completed the second game, and I cried. I will admit I cried. And I have now begun to watch the show's spin-off, and I'm absolutely obsessed already, and I'm only on episode 3. So to honour my love for the video game and the HBO spin-off, this week's actor of the week for me is the amazingly talented Pedro Pascal. So this is a 47-year-old American actor who began his rise to fame during the 4th season of the HBO fantasy series Game of Thrones, playing a character called Oberyn Martell. After nearly 2 decades of taking small roles in film and television, this was an absolute breakout role for Pascal, who's since become the internet's most loved actor, and he's even being called the internet's daddy, with people being absolutely obsessed with his current roles in The Mandalorian as Din Djarin and The Last of Us, within both of which he plays fatherly figures, so I honestly think this is quite an apt nickname. Discussing his role as the beloved Joel Miller from The Last of Us, in a recent interview with Wired, Pascal expressed that, "I think what's scary about Joel is none of us really know what we'd be capable of if faced with the idea of losing a loved one. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, being alive or even being a human is directly connected to the love you feel. Existing is connecting to the love that you feel towards a particular relationship, your child, your partner. And what does it feel like to lose that? That's what makes you human and inhuman. It's such a beautiful question that the video game poses." And honestly, the way that dynamics are shown in The Last of Us, I can see already, even 3 episodes in, the way that Joel loses his daughter. That is a tiny bit of a spoiler, but the video game has been out for a while, so the way that Joel loses his daughter Sarah and the dynamic he brings up with Ellie, like initially calling her Cargo and then being able to build up a dynamic where he's calling her baby girl, the nickname he called his daughter. Oh my god, it is heartbreaking. But the way that some of the scenes in the video game are shot compared to the way like the HBO series does this, like there's a car scene where they're initially leaving like the desolate land because the cordyceps virus is infecting them. Oh my god, it is shot scene for scene. It is insane. And in regards to his Star Wars project of The Mandalorian, fans speculated that upon witnessing the end of Din Djarin's story at the end of Season 2, as he removed his helmet, breaking the codes of Mandalore, to tearfully say goodbye to Grogu before sending him before sending the foundling off to train with Luke Skywalker, that this would be the last we saw of Pascal within the franchise. But upon returning in the Book of Boba Fett and discussing his role as the bounty hunting Din Djarin within The Mandalorian, he commented that, "As instantly disarming as that relationship is, even though in the initial reluctance, there's still so much to explore as far as that parent-child dynamic is concerned. We know what Din wants. Din wants back in. He wants back into Mandalore, but what his heart needs is Grogu." And just the way that Pascal has done these, like, fatherly figures on screen. Yes, one of them is with a 13-year-old who is immune to a zombie virus, and the other one is literally like a little green alien who we all know and love. The way that he portrays these, like, fatherly figure roles are so beautiful. Like I said, with the dynamics he's got with Ellie later on within The Last of Us, and the dynamics he's got with, like, because initially they're like both cargo basically. Like Grogu was up for bounty, Ellie's being chased by the Fireflies because she's immune to the virus and she's potentially going to save all of mankind. The dynamics that Pascal portrays on screen are absolutely wonderful, and I cannot wait to delve into The Last of Us more, as I literally got Now TV purely to watch this.
Oh, I love that.
I know. But when talking about The Last of Us 2, there are some beautiful scenes within which that Ellie and Joel play guitar together, which is a present that Joel gives Ellie. So our final song on Showtime Central today is The Wayfaring Stranger, played by both Joel and Ellie in their respective roles within the video game. What a brilliant way to end this week's show. I will admit, when that did appear in the credits of the second game, I did shed a little tear because of the dynamics of Joel and Ellie. But unfortunately, that is all we've got time for on this week of Showtime Central. But next week, we'll be back on the workshop, as always, same time, same place from 12 to 1, where we'll be bringing you all the latest dance, arts and entertainment news as always. And hopefully next week I've scheduled a little interview, like I teased, with the brains behind a production called Fanboy that's recently graced our stage in Theatre Royal Plymouth, with a creative called Joe Selman-Lever, who plays himself in a one-man play. So hopefully that'll be quite an exciting one next week. But don't forget to stay tuned to the workshop, as up next we have a slight change in schedule today, meaning up now is an episode of my dissertation, Noteworthy, where I'll embark on a whistle-stop tour of the work of Andrew Lloyd Webber, one of the most acclaimed Broadway and West End lyricists of all time. Hello and welcome back to Noteworthy, a radio show focusing on Broadway and the West End's most celebrated lyricists. I'll be your host, Holly Wigmore, and having looked at the late Stephen Sondheim in episode 1, we'll now be exploring the living legacy of one of the most influential British lyricists of all time, Andrew Lloyd Webber. At his current age of 74, Lloyd Webber has had some of the longest consistent runs of productions on world stages. Truly presenting his admiration and contribution to the arts, Lloyd Webber even owns 6 London theatres, including the iconic London Palladium and the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. His significance means that he's been awarded 7 Olivier Awards and a